It must have been difficult as well, sort of, as you've kind of mentioned already, having established internationals and professionals that are there full time, fully integrated from the start, and then players who are part time, having to work jobs, work in the evening, and so on. So that initial period, it sounds like it must have been really tough. Even though we've got a solution in the end, it sounds like a really tough period to deal with actually at the start.
Yeah, I think what you've got is you've got a group of players that are really embracing this new environment because it is much different to what it used to be. But then you've also got a group of players that are looking down, thinking, this is not where it needs to be. This environment isn't conducive of performance, because the international players came from the environment of an old central contract system where they were able to train full time. They weren't training at 8 till 10 p.m. of an evening on a sports college. So it was almost like they felt like they took a sort of step backwards. Whereas what we were trying to build was this football team that was taking a step forwards. We were going to be the team that was going to work in a way that was going to be inducive of a real entertaining style and a real professional football team. So we had to make some clinical decisions and some really decisive decisions really quickly for the good of the team, and to almost have the players think this was a great decision to come here, because they came from really established women's football teams like Notts County, like Arsenal, like Everton. So we had to make the decision really quickly.
I think it just showed that the landscape was changing really quickly in the women's game, and maybe people had a perception of what it was, and then ultimately when you get your hands into the the dirt, as it were, you kind of suddenly realize that actually no, it there's a level that in a certain standard, and I think what I'm trying to say is that the club recognized that, and it recognized that it needed fixing, and the club put it right and created an environment, where we obviously went on to win a trophy in our first season.
Just before we get on to that trophy, Gareth, you were obviously part of the academy at the time as well. From an internal, outside perspective, what was it like for you in those first few months when the women's team was relaunched and so on? What do you remember from that?
I remember a lot, because I was obviously under 16 coach at the time, and I worked closely with Nick in his kind of. He was taking a team. I remember you were taking the under 9s, and they moved you into this 12-13s assistant role. And I remember you being a bit naffed off at the time. And I said, "Come on, we'll make it fun, and we'll get around the sessions," because I had to line manage all of those people within that bracket, and Nick was one of them. I think I remember us going to Wrexham one day. I took you back to one of my former clubs, Wrexham. We had a good day there, and just give them a bit of a taster of, obviously, the day-to-day of what football looks like. And I think that period was really good for me as a coach, because, like Nick said, it was like this hybrid model of pros here. And I'm glad you reminded me the names. I remember Bex Hassett now, and Tony was there, wasn't she? And obviously Jill and Steph and KB. But those guys would join in the training sessions. Do you remember at Platt Lane? These would join in the training sessions with the 16s.
They were so fun.
So
I actually think that's one of the things we did. And probably a little bit unconsciously did a lot of things that changed the perception of the women's teams really quickly. Like the internationals went in and trained with the boys. So the boys, because they saw their quality and the coaches worked with them, it actually molded the environment really quickly. It became a real inclusive environment really quickly, I think.
I think that's a big point, though. I don't think yet you give yourself enough credit there, because I remember you were reiterating those points around challenging those perceptions, because we got fobbed off quite a lot. Just being in the environment, people kind of looked at us like, "Why are you here?" We had to really fight to kind of make sure that we actually belong and we got the respect that we deserved, to get to where it is today. But I remember joining in some of those sessions. I remember joining in Jason's Wilcox's sessions with the 18s and stuff like that, and they were absolutely amazing. I think my first week at the club, they took me over to, where was it? It was Carrington when we were still training. We
used to do 2 days at Carrington.
Yeah.
That's right.
And I went over there and joined in the small-sided games, and it was honestly like, I was like, this is what it's about. Like this is like the level that we want to be tested at, and I just kind of wish that the entire team could have felt that.
Yeah. How long did that go on for then, that period of training?
It was probably about 6-8 weeks, and then we realised really quickly that being in a sports college where there was a lot of the public there wasn't conducive to the way we wanted to treat our football players. I think that period was a really good period for me, because over that sort of transition of trying to go from small-sided to 11-a-side, I had really good relationships. Like Gareth, we went to Abu Dhabi. I supported you in the Rishworth. So I always had the opportunity to work with the 16s or the 18s, not in a formal way. It was only because the coaches gave me the opportunity and supported me. So when I took the women's team, they were really open to allowing the players to train and allowing me to be integrated within that department, because the department was like, Gareth Lyne managed 16s, 15s, 14s, 13s and 12s, and I sort of was just a sort of spare part in that moment, because there just wasn't a role for me. So when I moved to the women's team, I stayed sort of in the same role, just with a different team.
That relationship's already there.
Yeah.
Really important. Obviously, at the end of that first season, we get the trophy, the Conti Cup in 2014. There were a lot of big results en route to that, beating Chelsea in the semis and on the final day of the season as well. But this is a question for both of you, really. But firstly, with Nick, that first trophy, how significant did that feel for you at the time, just to kind of as a platform to then move on to bigger and better things?
Yeah, I think when I reflect on that, it's a great example of real team spirit and togetherness, because we didn't have so much quality. And I don't say that because we had bad players. We just had really inconsistent results. Our league position was, 7th maybe that year. So our league results were really inconsistent. But in a cup competition, and we're really lucky actually, because over my time of the Continental Cup, it bounced around from being group stage to knockout. So in that 2014, we lost the first game away to Doncaster Bells. If it was a knockout, we'd have been out. But because it was a league format, we managed to go. We beat Liverpool, we beat Everton. We then got through. We got Chelsea in the semi-final. We played at Hyde. That was when we used to do some of the games at Hyde.
That was so good.
And we actually changed the strategy of the game. We actually just sat in and played on counter-attack, because we knew they were strong. They were going to win the league that year. And we scored. We regained it. Tony scored. We managed to go to the final. And then even in the final, for the first 60 minutes, if we hadn't had KB in goal, we'd have lost the game 5-0. It was just pulling saves out everywhere. And I just think it was just meant to be. I have no explanation in how we won that trophy, other than we nicked a goal and we went on and won it. But I think what it did was, it did reinforce belief that, we want to be an integral part of the development of the women's game. We want to be an important team in the WSL. But it was definitely team spirit and togetherness that carried us through that final. Yeah.
Well, I thought it was quite nice as well, because I obviously looked back at the highlights again this morning. I mean, as Nick said, some of the saves are ridiculous, firstly, so fair play. It was quite nice and quite poetic in a way that it's Crystal who puts the ball in, one of the players who was there before the relaunch, for Izzy, who's then obviously one of the marquee players. So just really nice sort of to show the transition between the original team and then the team that we then became as well. Just thought it was a really nice.
Yeah, I think that team had a really good balance of. I say really good balance. When I say the team, the results were inconsistent, it was probably because of the team. We had Georgia Brown played at right back. She'd never played, and we put her in the game because we just had injuries or we had suspensions. And like you say, Crystal Johnson played a lot that season. Abby McManus.
Yeah.
I tell you why Georgia played is because Abby got sent off in the Chelsea game, which was the last game of the season, for elbowing Yuki Agimi. She got sent off, which meant she missed the final. So then we had to throw Georgia in, who's 17, never played. I just think it had a good mix of, we just tried really hard and wanted to win really badly.
Yeah. And your first trophy, Gareth, was only a couple of months after you'd taken on the role, obviously the FA Cup. How significant did that feel for you, just sort of getting, again, as I've said it before, getting your feet under the table, really establishing yourself in that role?
Yeah, I think similar to what Nick says, it kind of just reinforces the belief a little bit around what you do. I mean, obviously Nick, we got locked down, and Nick got us to the quarterfinals, so it was he did a lot of the hard work. But yeah, for me, if you remember, that was in the November the 1st, I think it was, in 2021 maybe, or 2020.
One of them, yeah.
No, it was 2020, yeah, because it was March was the lockdown, yeah. So we were playing catch up. We had, I think, the following season 2 FA Cups, because they were rolling over. But yeah, of course, it was great, especially at Wembley. And I think it was weird sensation because we were behind closed doors with no fans. But it was great, and I think we ran close that season in the league title as well. We took it to the final day. If things had gone our way a little bit here or there. But of course, yeah, I think winning that first trophy is really important, and it just settles everything down, and you're then hungry for the next one.